Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the Inbound Lunch Bunch for December. It's hard to believe that we're already at the end of the year. This month, we're going to talk about personalizing email and web experiences, something that I'm sure many of you have thought about kind of throughout the year. You've heard some prevailing themes in some of our discussions. So we're going to kind of take the quick look back and talk a little bit more about what that really means and what you can get out of it. So just to introduce myself, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nisha Mangus. I'm the Director of Consulting here at HighRoad Solutions. I have over 15 years of experience in digital marketing. I've had a lot of opportunities to consult with associations and really talk to them about their lead gen programs and talk about change management and kind of what goes hand in hand in kind of transforming a typical kind of traditional marketing view into something a little bit more different that focuses more on lead gen and member acquisition. As always, we're always looking for ways in which to connect with each other. So feel free to follow us on Twitter, to reach out on LinkedIn. And of course, if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions or topics for future webinars, feel free to reach out and let us know. A couple of housekeeping items. One thing to point out and to always remember, we send you some email reminders as well, but there are a ton of resources available to you through our HighRoad U program. So all of last year's Inbound Lunch Bunch sessions are actually available on demand. We have a toolkit list as well that I encourage all of you to participate in and take a look at. It's particularly helpful for marketing practitioners who don't have the time to recreate the wheel. And so there are a lot of toolkits in there that you'll find for persona development workshops, for surveys, for budgetary planning, for kind of resource allocation. There are all sorts of handy tools in there that I encourage you to look through, because you can definitely kind of use some of them as is when you're putting some of your programs together. If I suddenly seem to drop off the call, hang tight. I'll dial back in. I think good luck so far these past couple of months with Zoom, but one never knows. And then, of course, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat window. I'll try to answer them as we go through the presentation, or I'll save them until the end, and then we can kind of discuss further. All right, so this is Inbound Lunch Bunch. Hopefully you've already had lunch and you're not too hungry, but we are talking about inbound marketing. All right, so as always, I always like to start here kind of with a refresher on what inbound marketing is. So remember, inbound marketing is actually a methodology coined by HubSpot in particular, and they've been rather smart about taking all these different kind of frameworks, marketing frameworks, and overlaying them on top of a methodology that you can really kind of carve into and follow key pillars of, right? So the entire methodology is structured around 4 key pillars of attracting, connecting, engaging, and delighting. And it also identifies who we're interacting with at each stage. But I always like to kind of start off each session by going back to this diagram just to kind of understand, like, again, if we're talking about inbound marketing, what does that mean? All right, so inbound marketing, again, is a way in which to attract strangers, right? Do something with them so that they turn into visitors, right? Further connect with them so that they become leads in our system, in our platform, engage with them so that, again, they move into being a customer, they kind of start to move down that funnel, and then delight and become our brand advocates, right? So kind of that as a whole is captured what really actually works very well for associations as well, right? So the idea is to kind of say under this core kind of pillars, what are all the activities, the digital marketing activities that you could use or leverage to move a stranger from the funnel kind of up here at the top, down the funnel into becoming your advocate. And that's really kind of where the whole methodology kind of comes from. So it's rather clever because, again, it's really leveraging and tapping into things that have already been set, right, set in place. We're talking about content marketing, we're talking about social media marketing, lots of marketing strategy. All these things kind of come together kind of in a consumable format that's easy to understand. So our topic this month is about personalization, right? So really kind of when we think about it from the inbound marketing perspective, if you ask the question, where does personalization fit into this? If you were to look at this diagram, the answer is it fits in every single, it can fit into every single stage or every single pillar here, right? So you can do personalization to attract strangers. You can use them to connect with visitors to become, kind of lead them down to become leads, further engage and delight, of course, right? So again, personalization in this key form can be applied across the board, and that's what makes it really interesting. Some people seem to think that personalization is not that easy. I think it's because, again, if we're thinking of a very narrow viewpoint of how you interact with your customer or with your prospect, yes, it could seem as, I don't know, there doesn't seem to be a lot of options, but the idea for this particular session is to give you some ideas and some examples. So before we go into that, we always like to revisit the smart MarTech stack, right? So if you recall, marketing technology stack is about thinking through how all of your applications and your systems sit together in order for you to be able to use your marketing program. And so we've revisited this image and this diagram kind of again and again throughout our sessions. The prevailing theme here is hopefully what you're able to pick out is that look at the way everything's structured. It's all about the user. User is in the middle for a reason, right? So everything that that user does, everything that the user feels, everything that they have in terms of their preferences, their likes, their dislikes, all of their personal data, that data is what drives everything else, right? That data and their preferences is what really controls how we put together marketing programs in order to reach out to them, right? So it is all about the user, right? So again, kind of over the past years, you've seen the emergence of user experience, right? It's about the power of use, everything's user-centric. There's a reason to that, right? And again, whatever is user-centric goes back to being personalized, right? So you really think about it from that perspective. Everything that we do, including our websites, including our applications, announcements, PR, event marketing, all of that, even email preference center, all of that goes back to what is it that the user is looking for, and can we provide it to them, right? So in this world, we really don't want to be in a position where we're doing anything generic, right? So the big question becomes, for some people who don't get it, is why do we have to personalize? Why is it, right? So if it's not obvious, hopefully this diagram here kind of over at the right makes it obvious, right? If you look at it from a generational standpoint, look at the gap, right? So from 2015 all the way to 2028, look at the population growth and kind of who we're talking to. So as marketers, right? As a marketer, my core audience, this is kind of my cross segment of my core audience, right? So I need to know, a couple of things. One, I need to know that millennials are going to be my highest group, my highest target group, or highest population. I'm going to need to know, obviously, how to interact with boomers, right? But, look at kind of the downtrend, right? So there's a little bit of downtrend, and then Gen X kind of in the middle. What's more important for me to note, right? And so, the whole point of this is to say millennials are not the same as Gen X, and Gen X is not the same as a boomer, and vice versa, right? Nobody is the same. So therefore, your messaging that goes out to any one of these groups cannot be the same, right? And that's kind of fundamentally where we are with why there's so much pressure now and desire to really personalize. We are making more content today than we were a year ago. That's kind of a given, right? Marketers are creating much more content, right? And the reason is, one of the reasons, driving reasons behind that is that as marketers, we want to avoid the risk of being ignored, right? We don't want to have one thing that we reuse again and again and again, which in turn builds some sort of familiarity or blindness, right? We don't want our prospects, as well as our clients or customers or members, to tune us out. So we need to create value, right? And the idea is to kind of create that value in a two-way channel. So we want to have a conversation, right? This is why we hear, they're not buzz terms, right? But they're very popular terms that are used, such as engagement. We want to have engagement. We want to move from push marketing to pull marketing. We want to have two-way discussions or dialogues where the person, where we make ourselves sticky, quote unquote, sticky to that particular user. They come back to us. They have a conversation. They take some piece of value-added information. They absorb it. They consume it, right? So the whole idea around this and kind of creating that established relationship is, in order to do that, right, it's like with any relationship, you have to get to know each other, and you have to know what to say to get that person to be able to have that level of engaged discussion or conversation with you, right? So again, it really comes back to these audiences and recognizing that these audiences are not the same. What drives them is not the same, right, across any kind of consumption vehicle, motivational kind of lifestyle factors. They're not the same, and therefore, why would we spend all our effort and all our money on creating one message for all of them when we know that's not really going to appeal to them? So that's really the big question, right? So when we talk about personalization, then the easy route, which is what everyone takes, which is kind of at minimum by default, what you kind of should be seeing out there in the market already, is that you're leveraging some data, right? So we know we have some data about these particular members, about these particular customers who are not yet members. They've bought stuff from us. They've given us their personal information, you know, to some sort of degree. We found them on social media. So therefore, at minimum, we are communicating with them by saying, you know, putting personalization tags in an email, like hello, first name, right? But that's not where it stops, right? And that's not where it should stop. Again, I think associations are getting better at thinking about experiences and thinking about the entertainment factor and thinking about their communication vehicles and how can they personalize. But I think there is some limitations in realizing that what personalization actually means, right? So again, personalization, our definition needs to get a little bit broader, right? So if you're thinking about how can you as an association personalize, let's think of it from a perspective of how you interact with all the people that you do interact with, right? So, you know, e-commerce is a big engine, right? It's a big source of revenue. Everybody has a store or a bookstore or something from that capacity, right? So take a look at your e-commerce experience, because likely the browsing experience of someone who's coming to your site to consume information is going to be a little bit more simplified than someone who's going to buy something with you. Someone who's going to buy something from you, their interaction is very kind of step related, right? It's a very process oriented workflow, right? There's an exchange of information at each particular step, right? And there's an acknowledgement that if you don't get this process workflow right, the person will leave, right? So if they don't feel that they're confident that you're providing a secure transaction, they're out of there. They're not going to complete their checkout process, right? So already a lot of thought has been put into that user experience, right? So nobody's really kind of said that, oh, that's personalization, but that is what personalization is. Personalization is about thinking through that user experience and really thinking about what are all the steps that make the person feel comfortable to move to the next step and complete their conversion, right? So it's all about conversion. In this case, it's all about buying the book, downloading the webinar, purchasing it first, buying a bundle, right? Whatever it is, you want to be in a position to institute that level of confidence. And you do that by obviously having best practices and best standards, right? To kind of say, look, we're SSL secure, we've got secure checkout, you know, we don't save personally identifiable information unless it's, you know, in this format, here's our privacy terms, right? There are all those indicators there. And then there are the extra bells and whistles, right? So on an e-commerce platform now, right, where we are today at the end of 2016, we don't see those as bells and whistles anymore. But if you've been in the association world for a while, you probably do remember a point where everybody was, can I have an e-commerce or a checkout store like Amazon? Right, so we've definitely seen that transition, right? But all of that is personalization. So again, we go back to taking a look at your e-commerce experience and carving that out and seeing where can you further personalize? What are all the interactive steps, right? Thinking about email transactional receipts, right? So we know that email is subscription-based, right? If somebody doesn't want to receive your email, they're going to opt out of it. We also know that transactional emails, right, such as a receipt, is something that everybody wants to have, wants to receive, they need to see it, even if they've said, I don't really want to get other promotional emails from you, right? So again, it's an opportunity for you to really think about not to sell, right? So I'm not saying put in an ad, put in a banner ad. Sure, you can, but what you really want to do is, again, think about ways in which to personalize further inside of that email transaction. Email is seen as something that's very kind of one-to-one and yet passive, right? It's a lot of information that you put out there. Maybe if you're lucky, somebody will click on it and do what you want them to do. But there are ways in which to kind of establish a visual identity, establish a brand, a persona, a type of personality. And, you know, there are ways in which to do that, again, come across as personalization. What you also want to do is think about adding in intelligent content recommendation tools, because again, if you think about it, that is a form of personalization. That's what we see on websites. So if you're browsing on a website, you suddenly see a pop-up, right, that says, you know, if you're interested in this particular topic or this topic you're reading on this page, save this for later. Why don't you go ahead and bookmark this page? Just leave it on Facebook if you want to bookmark something or save for later, right? Or, you know, kind of content that's related that's being put in front of you. That is, again, another form of personalization. And it's contextual, right? So again, what we're doing is we're seeing that, that movement kind of across the base to kind of say that we understand and we're understanding your behavior in the moment right now, based on what we see right now in the moment, plus perhaps what we know about you already, gives us enough information to provide you with the next level of a personalized experience. It's all about getting them to convert or move to the next page or to consume something further. In addition to that, again, what we're also doing is we're aggregating all this digital data. The idea is to say, for every interaction that we put out there, anything that we're seeing, somebody's consuming something, they're downloading something, they're looking at something, we want to capture that data because that in turn helps build us a kind of composite 360-degree user profile that we can use further. And this is kind of one of the value adds of having something like a marketing automation platform, because you're collecting all of that data kind of in real time that you can then put something together to further personalize the experience. So the idea behind all of this is to kind of get to that level of iteration where you're constantly looking at stuff that comes through and further enhancing, right? So personalization doesn't stop, right? There's never a time frame or never a point in time where you can say, you would say, we don't need to do anything else because we know this person inside out, right? That's to assume that person has zero growth potential. They're never going to change their mind about something. They're never going to, have the capacity or the aptitude or want to have something different, right? So we'll never get to that point, which means it's endless opportunity and endless, endless ways for a marketer to be able to kind of further personalize. Personas, again, are very important in this process, right? So again, developing personas will help you personalize, right? So again, you think about a persona. Remember, a persona is a fictional character. It's a fictional character that represents the ideal consumer, your ideal member, your ideal prospect, right? So you want to know as much about that persona, and hopefully your persona is accurate because you are going to then build your programs around those personas, right? So what's nice is now you're collecting feedback. You're collecting feedback and providing a program to someone who is actually the representative of your ideal prospect, right? This is not historical data. This is not based on what I think I like. This is about what we know that your prospect or that your ideal member likes, right? So again, from a personalization standpoint, you really want to know what those personas are. You really want to live and breathe them for a while to know what they would find appealing. Part of that is thinking about how do you make emails to be more personal. So again, people saying like, oh, hello, Suzanne, hello, Manisha, hello, Katie, right? That's great because, oh, they know my name, but, obviously that's rather, that's a standard. That's an expectation. That's a tool application, applied use of a data point. We want to think more. So the question is, how can you rethink the email to be personal? This is where we get into talking about progressive profiling on a landing page where your form already knows who you are because it's already recognized that you've been to this page before. It's going to check all of your data. It's going to check to see what we know about you. And then if there's something else that we want to collect about you, it'll pre-populate the form and ask you to fill out the piece of information that we don't have, right? So that's a form of personalization. When you're thinking about email, your email could be language. It could be, you know what, I know that you're a member, therefore I'm not going to show you the default generic text message that I normally would show to non-members. I'm going to show you the special message for members. At this time of year, we have like an extra, holiday bonus or something, right? It's something special, right? So the idea is to kind of say, even email, which is again, kind of one-to-one, one-directional, slightly more push rather than pull, right? Even that can be personalized to a degree to at least make the person realize that this organization is smart enough to recognize the value that I contribute. So writing headlines per audience or persona is another way to do it, right? So this whole idea of personalization, hopefully the whole idea is to kind of make sure that you realize that it's not about just data points or like, here's all the information I know about you. It's about the practical application that you can put together, try to demonstrate here is what I know about you, and here is why me knowing this about you makes me a valuable kind of a valuable program to offer. I have a valuable program to offer. Right, so other ways in which you can personalize, right? And again, this is kind of the taking it out of the selfie, right? Or just the what's in it for me factor, right? Self-benchmarking is a way as well. You can use interactive tools interactive calls to action as well to do that, to do personalized surveys, self-assessment forms, Facebook contests, selfie contests, Instagram, using Instagram, calculators, planning tools, any sort of matchmaking, right? All those pieces are other ways in which, you know, they've got an interactive component to them, as well as a way to kind of further personalize, right? So either we're taking data points, right? If you think about, you know, where are we capturing our insights, some of these actual interactive CPAs or interactive content pieces, they're actually collecting data for you, right? So the end result is something that you'll be able to work with, right, to further personalize. Or in a way, it's trying to, again, try to say, like, you know, pick your option, I'll give you something that I think you'll be interested in. So having said that, you know, the question about, you know, can interactive content help? The answer is yes, absolutely, right? So again, remember, going back to our smart MarTech stack, everything is about the user. So it's the user-centric view where we have to address what's in it for me, right? That's the big thing, right? And what's in it for me? Why should I waste my time? Why should I use my time or contribute my time or give you my time to read something that you sent me, right? Or to look at something that you sent me. You know, so again, the idea is to move them more towards pull marketing and to leverage the fear of missing out. Because again, you know, from that perspective, especially in the association world, we're thinking about those audiences and those personas. Likely when you sit down to do your persona development, you'll find a lot of your personas are those people who don't want to miss out, right? They're the reasons, they're the people probably, again, speculative, but again, you can always go back to empirical data and look at it, right? But they are probably the people who perhaps don't open every single email that you send them, but they don't unsubscribe as well, right? It's because, again, they don't want to miss out, right? So if you are able to identify the right personas and figure out kind of this is what their motivator is, they don't want to miss out. And you can put together programs that are based on more than just sending out emails, right? You can put stuff together where it connects them to other users. You do social networking, you can bring them to your private community. You can do a lot more if you understand kind of what the motivators and drivers are of your personas. On top of that, like I said, interactive content helps by gathering more insights, right? So the idea here is, again, at no given point in time do you know everything about everyone. So there's, you know, nothing new to learn, right? There's always something that you'll be collecting data on in that perspective and in that fashion. So that's the overview. I thought it would be interesting to kind of see some of these in action. So again, I encourage you kind of as you go through your own browsing experience, kind of as you do this, especially now when we're doing kind of retail purchasing and retail therapy for the season. But it's interesting to kind of see all of this play out and see what some organizations are doing. The retailers, they have a head start, obviously. I mean, they do a really good job, but they've had to do that. Remember, they've had to really kind of think through their entertainment workflows. What does that look like? That entertainment mindset or perspective. They've had to overlay it on top of e-commerce platforms, you know, and they really had to think through all those user journeys. So obviously they've had that opportunity, but I would encourage you to kind of look at what they're doing and then be inspired. So what we can say is that, you know, some of these, like I said, they're not sexy, but there are ways to make that far more kind of personalized and a little bit more savvy. One is enable preference center. So it's a standard page typically. And typically an email preference center is just that. It actually is a list where you indicate what you want to receive from an association or an organization, and you just kind of list them out, right? So again, from a personalization perspective, that question is, how can you make this personalized, right? So obviously it's a one-to-one mapping, so yes. What can you do beyond that, right? So here's an example of what we call a flexing UPC, or the snow sports industry. They have a number of different audiences, very, very broad. They have, you know, member organizations, they have vendors, they have students, they have a number of different organizations who consume very specific communication vehicles. So if they were to put together one EPC for all of their member types, every single one, it would be a very large EPC, right? So the idea here is to say, you know what, if we know you're a member, let's go ahead and show you all the communication preferences that a member would need to see. If you are an exhibitor, you're not gonna sign up for the member newsletter. You're not gonna look for the industry planner. You're gonna look for very specific things about our events. Therefore, why are we gonna waste your time by showing you all these pieces that you'll have to scroll through when you come in and we know who you are and you're an exhibitor, we're only going to show you the programs and benefits and the communication packages that would be relevant to you as an exhibitor, right? So the idea is that this flexes to kind of who you are, right, and your relationship with the organization. On top of that, what we do is we do some sort of visual kind of creative to say that, oh, if you do want to leave, you want to leave our entire organization, let's put the motto in front of you and say this doesn't have to be goodbye, right? By reminding them, right? You can opt down, but if you permanently choose to opt out of everything, you won't receive anything regarding the following, right? And even the sections of like what you see here on the screen is, you know, by permanently opting out of all emails from SIA, you will not receive any information regarding the snow show registration reminders, research, or industry updates. Those are personalized to who that person is and what we know about their preferences already, right? So at no point is this a generic experience, right? And the subtlety of this is this is kind of why it's overlooked. But again, this is where you can kind of say, this is where we're leveraging personalization, right? We're tapping into the fear of missing out, right? Subtly. We're not making it too obvious. We're not being jerks about it. But what we are saying is that, you know what? We understand that maybe you want to opt down, but go ahead and opt down. Don't opt out, right? But the idea is to kind of use those experiences kind of wherever you can, get in front of the user and make it as personal as possible. Again, you can get personalized without having to be too technology savvy, right? What we looked at before with the email preference center was obviously sections and queries that are matching up kind of based on your member type, and then obviously presenting a dynamic display of information. You can create a simple static banner ad that just acknowledges, you know, who your audience is, right, and what message you want to reach out to them, right? So again, this is from ERA, their event that was held in Vegas, right? It's a big deal. It's a big show. Everybody goes there kind of to be seen, you know, and it's just a comment, right? It's just text, right? It's just a banner ad that says, you're still standing at the end of 3 days in Vegas, damn right you deserve an award, right? So again, it's tongue-in-cheek. It's just a, you know, it's a personality piece. It's static, right? There's no changing thing about it, but it shows up, you know, for those who've either attended the awards in the past, right, or have attended the event in the past, kind of knowing that, you know, ribbing you a little bit that we know who you are, and we know what goes on at the events, and we know what kind of events they are, and you know how intense they can be, and you know, of course, you deserve an award, right? So the idea is again to kind of know your personas and know who you're talking to, and then have that experience with them, or that interchange or exchange of information wherever they are, whether it's by email or it's on the website. We talked about intelligent ways in which to present content and information, kind of content recommendation tools, right? So this is an application you may have heard us talk about before called Bright Info. Bright Info has their own custom algorithm, which is really interesting. And what they do is they plug it in, and it's an algorithm that essentially indexes the entire site, all the content, and then it starts to make connections between content that's being browsed and content that's related. So it's their own special algorithm that matches up keywords, metadata, titles, as well as browser experiences to always have it running behind the scenes, right? And so again, if you're on a website, a content-heavy website where you're looking for a lot of information, or perhaps the content is all gated, right? The idea is to say, as you're looking, we're providing you with recommendations as well, right, in real time. And that's what you kind of see circled, is that, you know, as you're looking here, right, you've got your 3 blocks, you're looking at most recent, most commented, most recommended. On top of that, we're saying, you know, take a look at Aaron, right? And Aaron stands for program development, right? So when you click on it, here's what you see. And then, you know, on top of that, the next tool that they'll offer you at the bottom is saying, discover this teaching tool, right? So the idea is to kind of lead you through that process. There's nothing wrong with kind of, it's not a, I think some people perhaps may see it as kind of an advertising push, that it's really push marketing, you're getting in front of them, it's a banner ad. You know, it really kind of depends on the context of how you're looking through this, right? So the way this has been set up, it's been set up in a certain section of the website, right? It's a heavy content area site. It constantly changes. There are a number of resources that come through here. And so the idea is to say that, you know, one person may not necessarily have the time to browse through everything. However, if we have this algorithm running behind the scenes, based on what the person is already looking at, why not give them those tips and those reminders, right? So that's the idea, to kind of say, here's the recommended content. We're not doing a strict kind of interrupt where you have to click on it. it's just putting out the pop-up, right? I think, you know, we don't use this enough kind of today in website experiences, especially on sites that are content heavy. And don't forget, these don't have to be necessarily content heavy or content driven sites. You can do these for, you know, advertisements as well, right? So if you're looking at something, here's the program agenda, you know, for an event, you could do kind of the slide up to say, hey, by the way, just so you know, early bird registration is going to end in 2 weeks, right? Or if you're doing a promotion, somebody's looking at your e-commerce page and they're looking at your webinar selection, you could do a slide, or you could do some sort of pop-up, or you could do what Bright and Phil has, you know, as part of the content to say, here, you know, if you're looking for certification resources, research on certification, you know, here's some popular tools that you know our members use to help study, right, or to help prepare, right? So the idea there is kind of saying, you know, not necessarily I know who you are, Manisha Mangus, but I know that you probably have some of the same pain points that our other members have, right? And therefore, what we're doing is we're trying to put stuff in front of you that helps alleviate those pain points, right? And that is kind of one of the fundamentals of going back to inbound marketing, which is all about, you know, making sure you understand what the person's challenges are, right? What that stranger's challenges are, that you have content to kind of put out there to attract them, right? Turn them into visitors and then turn them into customers, right? So that's the same kinds of concept. What you're doing is you're trying to pull all the pieces together to make or solve a problem. And you know, in that turn, you know, further kind of immerse yourself in an engaged process with them. An example you may have heard us talk about before is the Association's Now newsletter. You know, again, this is what is running using our intelligent contextual email application called ICE. And the idea here is to say that, you know, there's all this content that ASE puts out, so much that they were, you know, I think they had like 12 newsletters. The idea is to say, you know, nobody has time for 12 newsletters. They probably want one that's super, super hyper personalized. So let's go ahead and personalize this newsletter so that I get what I want to see and somebody else will get what they want to see on their own time frame. And so it's all keying off of essentially kind of all these questions, right? So kind of what are your digests? What are your, you know, what do you want to see? Do you want to see alerts? Do you want to see, you know, what newsletters do you typically subscribe to? Based on that, what are your topics of areas of interest? Taking all of that together, it starts to put together kind of a personalized and intelligent contextual email based on data that we know about you, right? So it's a hyper-personalized experience. Again, you know, another example of this, New Jersey Society of CPAs, they use what they call CPD Connection, their newsletter, you know, again, to do two things: minimize the number of calls that they get towards the end of the year where people are asking how many credits, how many professional and education credits do I have on file, and how many more do I need to get? And on top of that, okay, so if I've got this many to fill, what courses can I use, right? So three core questions they've put together in one email. And the idea on their point, right, from their perspective, you know, kind of a what's in it for me factor for New Jersey Society of CPAs is to kind of say, from my perspective, we're reducing the number of calls that come into customer support, that come into the help desk, the member support area. What we're doing, you know, what they're doing specifically for their customers is providing that information before they even have to ask, right? So it's a regular thing that goes out and it taps into data. These are all data points that are stored inside of the association management system, right? So again, when we're talking about personalization, it can be personalization of the experience, personalization of the data that we have at hand, but really it comes down to how are you representing it, right? And that's usually the biggest effort that goes into it, right? If you do have all these data points, what can we put together in a way that makes the most sense for you? We were talking with one of our clients who is looking to apply ICE, the Intelligent Contextual Email Newsletter application, but for a very specific audience, for chapter leaders, right? And the idea there is to say, we have people who are members of multiple chapters and they occupy different roles. Depending on the role that you're in, you have a number of either documents or a number of things that you have to do. We have to send you a lot of reminders or information if you're a treasurer, if you're a chapter president, you know, if you're doing something, if you have a specific role. So their newsletter or their communications are not necessarily here's content that you might be interested in. It's more the informing. Here are all the deadlines upcoming. Here are the documents that you need. Here are the signatures that you need. Like, are you up to date? Right? And so it's very much independent of, oh, let me self-select and see what I'm interested in, and very much the we know you're busy, right? This is governance structure. You are participating. You are a valuable member. You're a volunteer, right? You're not doing this on your company time. You are doing this in your off time to participate with one of our committees or one of our chapters. Therefore, let's do what we can to solve a pain point that we know you have, which is probably a lack of time. So let's put something together to send it out to you that's fully automated, right? So it's a reduction on staff time, but more importantly, it knows who you are, it knows exactly what you need, right? And we're getting it to you, right? So again, that's the idea and the concept behind this. Kind of what are those drivers, and what are those pain points that you know that others, that you know that you can kind of tap into to alleviate their problems and their challenges. Other things that you kind of might have seen kind of on websites, again, you'll see some of these interactive calls to action pop up when you're on retail sites to say, you know, if you want 10%, you know, give us your email address, we'll add you to the newsletter, which is, you know, a cover way for acquisition. I don't know how well that works for associations off the bat, but again, it's always interesting to kind of see. Maybe it's tied to seasonal patterns. But the idea here is kind of to say that, you know, donate $10, you know, and visit the page. You receive it on your mobile device. And the idea is that when you get to the site, the $10, because it's just tied together, right? It's just kind of a quick, easy way to say, we said $10 in the text message. Here's the $10 button. We're not going to ask you to pick the drop down and scroll to 10 and then decide that, right? So it's kind of, you know, again, personalized URLs, whatever it is, it's just the idea is to kind of say we're consistent in our user experience and that user journey and that experience that you're setting. Now, as I said, Amazon was kind of at the forefront, right? Everybody wanted to have the Amazon experience. Can we, you know, we really want the e-commerce Amazon experience. So Amazon, what they're doing now is nothing, you know, this page doesn't really demonstrate anything kind of, ooh, wow, bells and whistles. But, you know, again, if we're talking about personalization and context and really knowing stuff, right, all it's doing is saying that, you know, we can do an upsell for you, right? So take your current total off and your gift card, and this is your cost after savings, right? It's just naturally kind of leveraging the data that you've already inputted into the screen to say, you're buying something of $140, by the way, you know, we'll give you a gift card, so your actual cost is like $109, right? It's just intuitive stuff that just makes sense to do. And this is why, again, we encourage you to go back to your e-commerce workflows or use cases and really kind of break that apart and really see if there are opportunities for you to kind of slip in additional things, right? We already see that, you know, people frequently bought with, right, or people who have been looking at this have all still been looking at this, right? So, you know, obviously some of those are covered, right? But you really want to think about, are there any other ways in which you can truly personalize the experience? Because if you create your call to action, right, this one here, if you create it in a compelling enough way to show that here's the demonstratable savings or kind of here's the value that you get, you're likely to get additional conversion, right? So Amazon didn't put this in here just for like, oh, you know what, we just want to, you know, we're just going to put it in there and see what happens, right? There's some studies behind it. There's just a compelling kind of argument for saying that, you know what, this is a compelling enough reason, probably is, for this kind of value dollar amount for someone to apply for the Visa card, right? And you could do, so you yourself kind of in your own e-commerce experience could take it one step further, right? To say, we noticed that you've put two webinars in your shopping cart. You can have kind of, again, the pop-up, right, the slider that calls out, or you could be on the checkout page and you can have a message to say, we noticed you have two, you know, if you put one more in there, you'll get a discount, right? Or we're running a bundle, right, where you can get both of these two webinars plus the handbook on the certification guidelines, right, or something, right? So the idea is to kind of say that there's always some way you can kind of put together and string together messages that will resonate with your end user, right, your buyer, in a way and presented kind of on screen on your website experience. Another example, again, this is like a transactional email. So it's not sexy. It's a very kind of standard, here's a straight up text-based email. Thanks for buying, you know, with us today. Here's all your order information, period. Then just basic stuff that you can put in here, again, to just try to demonstrate to the user that, yes, we know a little bit more about you. We're understanding that perhaps this is a first-time purchase. If this is the first time you're interacting with us, we definitely want to tell you, you know, we encourage you to set up a profile. You know, if you don't know how, you know, you don't know where your customer number is, no problem. It's listed at the top of this email, right? It's stuff like that. Again, people appreciate that, especially especially millennials, right? They'll appreciate that you're giving them all this information because they're very much do-it-yourselfer. They can figure it out on their own. They're highly unlikely to pick up the phone, right, and call customer care at 1-800 to know what their customer number is. They're going to get mad if they can't find it. They'll probably use the contact us form and tell you I can't find it anywhere. You think like your customer ID number would be more obvious on your e-commerce receipt or something, right? But they're unlikely to pick up the phone and call you, right? So why not just make it super easy and have all the information there, right? It's kind of, again, to say that here, here's all the information that we might need to know, right? So again, it's not presented, it's not heavy graphics, it's not, you need like a big designer or whatever. It's just thinking through that experience and really thinking about ways in which to kind of further personalize it, making it meaningful and useful. The bottom line is you can equate personalization to usefulness, but what you're trying to do is demonstrate value. My last kind of set of examples are around ebooks, and specifically, we talked about this before. We had a session that was using ebooks to generate leads and how effective that is. I think one of the cool things about this is that, again, what you're doing is you have your ebooks, you have your source offer, right? And then what you're doing is you're asking your users to customize, right? So it's an interactive play on this. What I like about this is that this is an example of you being able to collect insights. So for all your prospects that are out there, right, for your inbound marketing methodology, you've got all your feelers out there. You've got your nice landing page, a search engine optimized. Somebody puts in a search, they're directed to your landing page, right? You provide them with the information, like, you want to give them this ebook, but you want to collect 2 pieces of information. You're not asking for a form, right? Not yet. You haven't asked for that yet. What you're saying is, like, I have a ton of information for you. Why don't you tell me what job function represents you best, right? On top of that, why don't you tell me what some of the pain points are that you're experiencing that you want to have addressed, right? So now, as one fell swoop, you're collecting insights on these people, on these prospects, and at the same time, you're converting some of your content into personalized fashion, right? So it's not to say that necessarily like you're having a one-off individual ebook, right? But likely these are probably chapters that, the application is just going to put together and say, here's chapter 5 and here's chapter 7 based on your two selections, right? This is a combination, or at least at minimum in these 2 chapters, you're going to get the information that you were looking for, right? But again, what you're doing is, again, you're demonstrating 2 things. One, that you know who these users are to some degree, right? You're recognizing, you're demonstrating that we have information for people who are IT managers, who are developers, who are CIOs, right? And we understand, we as the royal we here, the organization, we understand the difference. We know what the difference is between these job functions, right? We don't have to tell you because we can tell, like, look at the pictures we're using, right? We're using very specific language, right? We're using developer, that's rather clear, CIO, right? Chief Information Officer. We're being very specific about a title, right? So one, we're demonstrating that we understand, at least from a job function, what it is that you might be looking for. And then 2, we've taken it one step further to say we understand some of the pain points or personas those job functions might be facing, right? And they're mutually exclusive in some cases. What CIO thinks is a challenge and what they face in terms of concern is going to be different from what an IT manager does, or what an IT manager would be concerned about or would want to learn more about, right? So very distinct, right? So you're demonstrating to your prospects that right? So therefore, you're more likely to get them to self-select and give you this information, right? What you're looking to do is kind of validate and say how many people, found our ebook to be interesting, did it match up to the personas that we actually thought they would match up to, things like that. So you're constantly collecting data and insights, which I think is a really neat way for you to constantly improve, right? And that's the name of the game, right? As I said, there will be no one point in time where you'll know everything there is to know about a prospect. They're constantly changing. You're constantly learning new things about them. The idea is for you to get to an iterative combination where you're using data points as well as behavioral points to really kind of create that nice user experience. So then when we go back to kind of all of those examples that I've gone through, right, and how it fits back into inbound methodology, remember, personalization helps you at every single stage. And that's the key message here, that, from that perspective, if you're looking to delight your advocates, there's lots of opportunities, possibilities. If you're looking to attract strangers, again, lots of opportunities and lots of ways in which to personalize the experience to hook them in, right? So we just saw the ebook as an example. That's a great example of, again, call to action with an offer that really demonstrates to the user that we may not know you personally, but we do know some of the problems that people in your job function face, right? And so again, it's to institute or instill that level of confidence as you kind of go through that process and kind of pull them down the funnel, right? So again, from this perspective, personalizing email and web experiences very, very kind of go hand in hand with everything that you do from an inbound marketing perspective. So when you are looking at stuff, definitely think about, you know, what does that mean? One, what does personalization really mean? How can I personalize, right? And then how do we get there, right? So I think we can kind of wrap up this particular session by talking about what you do, right, from that mindset to get there, right? And part of it is setting realistic expectations. So we often find organizations struggling with, you know, impressions or just reach and cost per engagement, and thinking about looking at those numbers, not really understanding, well, is this good or is this bad, right? I think in the past it's always been, you know, the larger the number, the better it is, right? So if we have like, you know, 500,000 impressions, that's really good, right? And so the question is it good? It may be good if you're in the right pool, right? If you've got 500,000 impressions in the right area where most of your ideal customers or members could be, then yes, it's a good number, right? But you want to set realistic expectations about that, especially from a personalization standpoint. Then you want to think about reach, right? So you really want to think about, you know, how are you going to effectively reach out to these people, right? And what does that mean to you, right? So again, what are you driving? And then how far can your reach go? Cost per engagement is also critical as well, right? So you want to think about the amount of effort that you're putting out there and per engagement that you receive, right? So some of these, you know, setting these expectations around these metrics are important to do, right? Because the idea is to say, you know, you're not looking for more is better, right? That's the old method. That's the old mentality of saying, let's send an email to 10,000 people, and our numbers game will be such that, you know, we'll get a conversion factor of 2%. So 2% of 10,000 people versus we sent our email out to 500 people, and we received, you know, a much more kind of marginal. We received a smaller group to interact with, but they're high quality leads, if that makes sense, right? So that's the idea, and that's the trade-off. So when you are thinking about personalization, you do have to think in smaller scales, right? Just by default, by de facto, if you're thinking about a persona, there is no one persona that represents your entire membership, right? You know, you'll typically have a couple. You'll have, you know, on average 5 to 6. And if you have to rank your personas, which is often what we do in our persona development workshops, you'll find that there are probably 2 personas that are ranked very high in terms of lifetime value. And lifetime value is a ratio to kind of show you, here's the value of that particular persona across the lifetime that they have with the organization. So it's not one snapshot in time. So what that helps you with is like the entire lifetime value in their cycle, you will spend X number of dollars kind of on them, right? Or you'll get your return out of them. And what does that return look like? Right? So typically in an organization that has 5 to 6 personas, they're talking about this, their lifetime value of 2, at least 2 are really high, right? And what you want to do is you want to see, is there a gap? Do you want to see, what you want to do is you want to make sure that everyone is in alignment to say, these are our lifetime value, you know, these are our rankings for these particular personas. We have to kind of not artificially stray away from them, right? So if we're producing content and we're struggling with trying to go after, build campaigns, and go after a persona whose lifetime value is actually ranked pretty low, then that's a mismatch or a misalignment between what we want to do and what we should be doing, right? So the whole idea is, you know, you're looking for those patterns, right? So you're looking for that information. What's also different, and I think it's starting to become more evident now, but I think this is something that associations struggle with slightly, is that you really got to think of it from an entertainment mindset, right? That everything that you do, any kind of digital presence that you have out there needs to be effective in what you're doing, and there has to be an entertainment value to it, right? So it can't be just, oh, it's functional, right? So IT is usually typically focused on, oh, it's functional, it works, right? A marketer, right, will say, yeah, but it looks terrible, right? Nobody's going to fill this out. Why would you fill this out? This form, it has a scroll bar on it. That alone, nobody wants to fill out something like that because it looks like you're going to ask them a ton of questions, when in fact all I have are 3 questions, but there seems to be a scroll bar here. Why does the scroll bar have to be here, right? You'll see these conversations happen more and more. We're seeing them happen more and more. I think in the past, as marketers were just kind of, resigned to the fact that, well, here's a technology constraint, and, it is what it is, take it or leave it. I think what we're starting to realize now, or we're being empowered with, is to say it might be a technology constraint, but we know there are ways to fix that. So therefore, what can we do to fix that? Because that's going to have a bottom line impact on what I'm trying to do, right? So think about it from that standpoint. The examples I go back to are, again, your e-commerce workflows, just what that user journey looks like. What can you improve? How do you break that apart? Right, you want to think about that, from your transactional receipts as well. We saw the example where it was a very plain Jane email receipt, but it had a lot of information in there that would appeal and respond, that would resonate with a particular audience. Right, so that's the idea. You want to cover both. Right, so you want to be really thinking about ways as the association, how can I facilitate that experience and make it all about the user? Right, so it still goes back to that user. Right, so the idea is to kind of say here, we're not looking for volume of conversions, we're looking for a small number of conversions that are likely to convert, right? We're looking for a small number of people who are highly likely to convert. So if I do a big marketing campaign, it goes out to a number of people, I get 5 qualified leads, I'm going to spend my next iteration on those 5 qualified leads, and it's okay. Right, it's not to say that, oh, it was a waste, I only got 5 people, right? You're supposed to turn around and spin it on its head and say, I got 5 really qualified people, they are all likely to buy. Otherwise, I would be unlikely to even find these 5 people if I did not do something that was personalized, right? Like to find these 5 people, highly qualified people, you had to get through certain steps. You had to get into their mind, you had to understand who they were, who they are, what they're looking for, what their pain points are, and then how you can fit into that model and solve their pain points, right? And so that's really the idea. If you're looking for that data, you're looking for that patterns, and then lastly, it's more about praise, right? So again, this is going to work for everyone, it's human nature, but everyone responds better when people are praised, right? So I think, the idea here is what you want to do is create personal user experiences or personalized user experiences that people want to rave about, right? So rather than whine and complain about, right? And you're more likely to kind of do that if you demonstrate that you know who they are and you are providing them with materials and information that are relevant to them. So that is all I have for today. I just want to wish you all happy holidays. We're at the end of the year. Hopefully we'll see you back in 2017. I'll leave the lines open if you have any questions, but other than that, I hope this was helpful to you, and have a great Friday.